And done. Oh, almost forgot to save. Let's see. Uh-oh. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. So glad to see you once again. And boy, are you in for a treat, because this is the show where we talk about each and every episode of DC animated shows. And right now we're talking about all the Batman new adventures, the new Batman adventure. So if that sounds like something you might be into, if you grew up in the 90s and are now an adult wanting to go back and look at the shows from the perspective of being an adult now, having grown up in the 90s, that was confusing, then just please hit the subscribe button down below. Hit like while you're there, because we've got a lot of great content coming your way. Like today's episode, You Scratch My Back, which originally aired on November 15th, 1997.
This is my gig. If I needed you, I'd have called.
So a couple episodes ago, we saw the introduction of the new Dick Grayson, the older Dick Grayson, but this is the first introduction to him as Nightwing. And he's gone through a bit of a change, and we get to see him working with Catwoman. But we'll talk all about that right after my 60-second rundown of the episode. Here we go. Dick Grayson, now as Nightwing, is closing in on a South American smuggling ring, and Batman and Batgirl show up to try to help, and he wants nothing to do with it because he's on his own, and this is his own thing, so he goes in to stop them, and Catwoman shows up, and she also wants to help him out, and is trying to earn his trust, and Barbara Gordon warns Dick Grayson about this, and he accuses her of being jealous, and so Nightwing is back out surveilling this house of the smuggler, Ricky the Hook, and Catwoman shows up and earns his trust, and they go in there and try to stop him. He steals some files and he goes off. Batman now shows up at Selina Kyle's apartment and says, hey, stay away from Nightwing. He doesn't deserve this. And Nightwing shows up and says, hey, I'm on my own and I can do what I want. So they work together to go in and stop Ricky the Hook. But then they find out that Selina Kyle has actually been double-crossing everybody, because she used Ricky the Hook to smuggle a gem out for her of the country. And so then she turns on Nightwing, and just then Batman and Batgirl show up, and we find out that Dick Grayson, Nightwing... We then find out that Nightwing has been working with Batman and Batgirl all along, and it was the old double cross, and then the trio of them work together to stop Ricky the Hook and smuggling, but then go out and also capture Catwoman. I'm losing my touch.
And I really liked you too.
So yes, this is the first episode in the New Adventures of Batman that introduces Nightwing, although I have mixed feelings about it. If you know anything about me, you know that I'm not big on the whole origin story. We saw Sins of the Father earlier, and I thought it was a waste because it just told this story about how Tim Drake became Robin and things like that. But in this one, we start out with Nightwing, with Dick Grayson as Nightwing, and we show a little bit of the dynamics when Batman and Batgirl show up to try to work with him, how he is now operating solo. But that's about the extent of the explanation. And I feel like, although I did not want an origin episode, and I didn't want to see the whole story of how Dick Grayson grew up and didn't want to be under Batman's shadow and wanted to go off on his own and went to Bloodhaven and came back and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't into all that. But I do feel like they maybe could have used just a smidge more explanation as to why there's the tension between Dick Grayson and Batman and why he wants to kind of be on his own.
I don't need a chaperone.
You don't know what she's capable of.
And like I said, I have mixed feelings because there's part of me that knows the story for myself and goes, oh, well, it's good they just jumped into it. And maybe you get enough of it just by seeing that relationship. Let me know how you feel about it. But I felt like it was a little too brief in the explanation of it.
You're the one who raised him.
But again, as far as the redesign, and not really a redesign because they never had him designed before, but the look of Nightwing in this episode or this series, I know it's more of a simplified design, but I'm not crazy about it. The all black suit with just the blue Nightwing logo, I don't feel says enough for the character. No, I don't want to go back to the old 70s version with the yellow and the disco collar and all that, but I feel like they could have taken a little bit more liberty or had a little bit more in the design. And also, Dick Grayson now with long hair is okay, but it's almost, I know in some of the artwork it maybe gets lost, but to me it really looks like it's a mullet. And I'm sorry, but Richard Dean Anderson is the only person that's ever been able to pull off a mullet. Maybe John Stamos. But other than that, I don't think it's the look for Dick Grayson.
Jealous?
Now, Catwoman's in this episode, and I'm okay with her new look. It's a more exaggerated look of Catwoman and has more of a feline kind of feel to it. The pale face behind the mask, I think, works and is just makes her sharper and more sleek and more cat-like. So I'm okay with that design of her.
You're welcome, by the way.
I love the way that they structure the Batman Gotham City world. And there was a deliberate effort to kind of set it in this kind of timeless sort of 40s stylistic period of time, but really kind of timeless. But then there's a couple of scenes that pop up every once in a while that really sort of date the episode. And I had to chuckle watching this, seeing Nightwing and Catwoman break into Ricky the Hook's flat and steal the shipping records, shipping manifesto or shipping schedule, whatever it was.
His shipping schedules.
On a floppy disk.
There. Let's go.
Yes, I am, of the age to remember floppy disks. I had a few. I remember in high school, it was a requirement that we had to have a floppy disk to save our files on when we would go down to the computer lab to do work. So I remember using floppy disks, and it certainly, obviously, didn't seem out of character to see that in the episode back then. But now, yeah, it's a little dated in that having a tangible media to store something on versus just hacking in and pulling things down from the cloud and accessing the information that way, which is also pretty funny because back in the 90s, there was a large focus and it was a big thing in movies and TV shows, the hacker. And it was usually a younger kid that could hack into a system and type things up on the computer and get in to access different people's files and databases that way. And so there's a little smidge of that, which kind of dates this episode.
What do you think you're doing?
Apparently getting set up by my new partner.
I do like the dynamic that is created in this episode, this kind of three-way dynamic, or I guess it'd be four-way dynamic, where we have Nightwing working with Catwoman, but then we have Barbara Gordon, who is in love with Dick Grayson, that has a little bit of jealousy about Catwoman being in the picture now. And then we have Batman, who has a little thing for Catwoman over here, who is trying to protect Dick Grayson, his kind of pseudo son. So it creates this interesting dynamic of all these characters connected in different ways and all dealing with this situation of Nightwing and Catwoman working together differently.
There they are, keeping tabs on me like I was some kind of criminal.
Now you see what I go through.
But I do have a slight issue with a moment in this. It is when Batman goes to Selina Kyle's apartment to tell her,
I want you to stay away from Nightwing.
Batman does know that Selina Kyle is Catwoman, and in some iterations, Selina Kyle knows Bruce Wayne is Catwoman. Bruce Wayne is Batman. The issue I have is they don't explain how Catwoman knows that Robin is now Nightwing.
Mother birds usually know when to let their robins leave the nest.
So, as far as I know in this series, Selina Kyle / Catwoman does not know that Dick Grayson is Robin or Nightwing. So if she doesn't know that, how would she know that Robin has now become Nightwing. To me, I feel like that she would just assume that Nightwing was a new hero or not know that how his connection was to Batman.
He's a big boy wonder now. A man wonder, in fact.
Because it can't be because of his voice, because if she could tell that Robin and Nightwing had the same voice, then why wouldn't she be able to tell that Dick Grayson had the same voice? I don't know. It's very confusing, but it was one of those moments that was kind of slipped in there, and I thought probably most kids wouldn't notice that, but I just had to scratch my head a bit that I don't think Selena Kyle would know that those two characters are the same person. Oh well.
If you don't trust me, Batman, trust him.
I guess I have to.
A couple other weird moments is that, again, in the time frame of this, Catwoman, Selena Kyle, and Bruce Wayne, they make reference to have been the same age and have this little love interest thing.
I don't trust you, Selena.
Of course you don't. That's why it never could have worked out between us.
And so when Catwoman first came on the scene, Dick Grayson was a child. And so now he's grown up into a young man and kisses Catwoman, or Catwoman kisses him, rather. But I feel like she would be old enough to be his mother then, if Bruce Wayne is a father figure.
You know I can't do that.
Again, they kind of play with these ages a little bit as the series went on, that some people are older, some people aren't. And there is a reference in this that I talked about earlier, that Barbara Gordon was the same age as Dick Grayson, but she seems younger in this episode. But they re-reference that in this, that she is the same, that they had a history together. So I guess she's still the same age, but...
I'm not stupid.
No, you just act that way sometimes.
So when it comes time to rank this episode, it's got some neat moments to it, and I like the dynamics of it, but it felt like it was missing something. It was something just was not holding my attention, and I don't know if it's because, as I had mentioned, that they didn't really explain a lot as to how Nightwing was on the scene or what the purpose of this episode was, other than to go introduce Nightwing. The twist at the end of him still working with Batman and Batgirl all along was kind of neat, but it wasn't enough to save this episode because it ultimately ended up falling at the number 5 spot of my favorite episodes so far. Sure, it's still in my top 5, but it's at the end of the list for right now, just below Sins of the Father, which was surprising to me because even though that was an origin episode, there was more of a story to tell there. Rather, this one just didn't seem to have a lot of purpose, and the villain wasn't that threatening. This Captain Hook character, Ricky the Hook, was just not much of a threat. And so the episode ended up being more about that dynamic of Nightwing and Catwoman work together, which was interesting, but wasn't enough to keep my interest through the episode.
Just brokenhearted. She led us right to the Emerald, just like you said.
You set me up!
Afraid so.
So, my question for you is, what character do you like Dick Grayson as most? Do you like him as Robin, or Nightwing, or even his short stint in the comics as Batman? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button. If you want to see more episodes like this, just hit subscribe because I have new episodes coming out every Tuesday and Thursday. And next Tuesday, I'll be talking about the return of the ventriloquist in Double Talk. So you don't want to miss that. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode. I'll see you soon.